Hi guys, Dr. Ken Nordberg again. We're going to cover part 2 of using precautions for better buck hunting or deer hunting. And this is a particularly important part. There's things on here that some people don't agree with me on. In fact, they agree rather loudly and sometimes with not kind words, and I don't know why. My sons and I, my 3 sons and I have been using the precautions that I'll be talking about today for nearly 30 years now with great success. So I know these precautions work. I know too though there's some circumstances where maybe they won't work. Like for example, the very first year we hunted in our new hunting area, which is also my far north study area, we didn't get a deer till the last day. I got that deer on the last day, and I was up there all alone on that day. I went up on the last day to try one more time. We hadn't taken a deer up till then, and I hiked a long way to get to a feeding area full of red osiers where I found a lot of tracks earlier, and I thought that would be a good spot to go. So I went there, and I got there really early in the dark, and put my stool down amongst a clump of young spruce trees atop a rocky outcropping, and I had this nice feeding area spread out in front of me there. And after about a half hour, it was getting to be fairly light, and nothing was happening. So I got out my grunt call and made a soft grunt with it, and out from another spruce clump about 100 yards away came a doe, a big doe, and she was looking this way and that, and I thought, well, she probably doesn't know where the sound came from, so I gave her another grunt, and she started marching right toward me, and as she did that, a nice big buck, the dominant breeding buck of the area, marched out behind her, and the 2 deer came right down and stopped about 20 yards away right in front of me, and I shot the buck, dropped it in its tracks, and it was one of the easiest hunts I've ever had for a dominant breeding buck. Well, the doe ran off a little bit, stood about 100 yards away out in the feeding area and looking at me, and all the while I was field dressing that buck, she was snorting. Just snort, snort, she just kept going on and on and on. And finally I stood up and I looked at her and says, "That's what you get for fooling around with other bucks. Now go find another buck and leave me alone." So anyway, and then she was quiet. But for 5 years after that, that darn doe was, I don't know, she probably recognized when the hunting season was going to begin, and it was just as though she was just waiting for me to show up again, and was really alert to anything that I might do in the dark, you know. And there was a place that I used to go. It was kind of a shortcut over a tall hill that we used to call, well, we still call it Antler Mountain. My son Ken has taken quite a few bucks around there, and we thought that was a good name for that mountain. Well, if she saw my dark shadow against the starlit sky coming over the top of that, she'd start snorting, and she'd snort and snort and snort. This is the only doe I've ever known that would do that, but she could completely ruin that area every time I tried to get into that spot. Well, we finally had to figure out that some low areas and thick cover to go around Antler Mountain to get into that doe's home range. And since that time, we've taken at least 4 dominant breeding bucks that was accompanying that same doe. She's not alive today. She died quite a few years ago. But what I'm going to teach you works if you do things right. Doesn't work every time. It's difficult to accomplish, which you're going to understand after I've told you everything I want to talk about today. But what we're going to be talking about, the main subject is the trip from deer camp to stand site. You know, we do this twice a day, every day up in our camp. And it's kind of a perilous trip. It's so easy to ruin it. I can imagine a lot of hunters have tried this sort of thing and they run into a doe like the one I just talked to, or other deer, and getting close to your stand, and pretty soon, and it's dark, and all of a sudden, snort, 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 all this kind of thing is going on. And they go, oh, this is really dumb and this is stupid, and you shouldn't even be telling people to even try this sort of thing, and I can understand that. But my sons and I, and now my grandsons as well, do this well. And we've been doing this for many years now, so I know it can be done, and I know you can learn to use it, and you can use it well as well. So I'm going to start out by talking about the trails that we use. This is part of Precautions. You know, in our state, and it's probably this way in many states, it's illegal to create trails on public land, in the woods, forests, for purposes of hunting. For, you know, if I went out there and started cutting, you know, get out there with a saw and start cutting down little trees and brush and all that kind of thing to make trails, I could be arrested for doing that. So when that became a law, and it wasn't that long ago, we decided the only alternative is to use deer trails, because deer trails are relatively easy to walk on without making a lot of noise in most places. I've seen some pretty tough ones to follow down in the Great Dismal Swamp down in Virginia when I was stationed in the Navy. It would have been very hard to do, but I have plenty of places, areas in the, where I hunt that are really just really thick with cover, really difficult to get through without making a lot of noise. And you'll see some. I'm going to show you some. We'll have some photos of places like that in this presentation. But we use deer trails. So now we don't use, you know, when we're scouting early, like in October and November, and even in the spring, and we'll be up there this year in the spring. We'll be putting out mineral blocks, but when we're scouting, we go everywhere. It doesn't matter, cross country, every trail we feel like following for a while, anything like that. We're just, we cover everything. And almost always we'll alarm some deer in the process because of what we're doing, and including big bucks. I remember one time John and I were out there scouting in October, and we had a really nice buck running and snorting ahead of us several times. We kept running into him. So, but when you're scouting, don't worry about just using deer trails. Do whatever you want to cover the country and learn it well. But for hunting, we've minimized the trails we use. And I've talked about this before, but I'll do it again here. Here's a rough diagram of a square mile where we hunt and study whitetails. And typical in our country, every square mile of suitable habitat will have 4 or 5 doe ranges in it. And this isn't, you know, a square. It's kind of irregular around the edges, and part of it goes down over this way, but the area involved, this where these 4 doe ranges, is the home range of a dominant breeding buck, the biggest and toughest and meanest buck in the area. And he owns this square mile. This is his. And these does have separate ranges. They're always separated by little spaces in between them. Something natural like maybe a road. We have an old logging trail that goes down through there that separates these. This is kind of a bog over here, and that separates those and so forth. It's kind of like that. But these dotted lines are trails we use. And sometimes they change a little bit. But in each one we've got a circular area, sometimes oblong like this one, or shaped irregular like this one. This one isn't all there, it goes way over here and comes back. But they're a circle of connecting deer trails within each of the doe ranges inside this square mile. And they're usually connected too. We can go from one to the other and cover the whole square mile if we want to, going from these circular areas inside the doe ranges. And each one of these borders feeding areas. We don't cross feeding areas when we're hunting, so you don't want those kind of trails to cross feeding areas. But there's a lot of feeding areas. Each doe will have 2, 3, or 4 feeding areas. Except maybe here in this range they have one big new, well, relatively new clear cut, and all the deer in this area feed in that clear cut, one clear cut. But at any rate, these circular trails, we call them cruise trails, which we'll be talking about further down the line another time. But those are all connecting deer trails. And then we got these little branches coming off them here and there. Those are stand-side approach trails. They come off of those trails. And during hunting seasons, those are the only trails we use. So the deer living in this area, they got lots of areas that they can live in where they're never going to run into fresh trail scents of a hunter or be bothered. We try to stay away from feeding, bedding areas, especially bedding areas of bucks. Because in this square mile, there'll be 3, 4 other bucks, mature bucks, 2.5 to, well, all the way up to 6.5 years of age. Only they aren't dominant breeding bucks because there's one in there that's bigger than them all and beat them up pretty good in October to make it known to all of them that he's the boss buck, and he's the only one that's going to breed the does, the mature does and yearling does that live in these doe ranges. So anyway, by limiting our movements during the hunting seasons, we have lots of areas whitetails can live in rather normally and be predictable, and when they feed and where they feed and things like that. And that gives us a great advantage in buck hunting. That's one of the things, one of the precautions we take, is the big ones. One of the precautions we take to improve our buck hunting. Now, all these, each one of these trails, we use deer trails, but they need cleaning, and especially when you get on trails that are going to stand sites. You want clean trails. We throw aside all dead branches in those, and we eliminate dead branches that stick out over the trail, so we got kind of a clean corridor or tunnel going through cover. And sometimes a live branch, a slender one that overhangs the trail, accidentally breaks when we walk by, and we pick those up and throw those aside as well. I'm sure you understand now. Get that out of the trail. Throw them aside. Like that. There's one sticking out of past trail. Get rid of that. There's one here. Dead branches. Now we got a relatively clean trail and you can walk up very quietly on this trail. If you're 100 yards away, would never know if you walk softly and without stopping. They won't be able to know what you are. So, this is what we do. So anyway, I wanted to show you that because this is part of what we do. And this is all done 2 or 3 weeks before deer hunting, the cleaning of trails and selecting trails and selecting stand sites and things of that sort. Once the deer season starts, any stand sites that we select before the season is used, usually those are the ones we're going to use for the first 2 to 3 days of the hunting season. They've already been selected based on deer signs that we found. After that, we select deer trails by walking on the cruise trails, these circular ones, until we come to very fresh tracks and or droppings of a mature buck. And let's say here's a feeding area over here, and gee, we come along here and we're walking here and we see tracks of a big buck. You know, the deer When we start using those trails during hunting season, some deer will use the same trails daily. Does and other deer, and sometimes even a mature buck, will walk right in your footprints in the snow. But most of the bigger bucks, they'll avoid those trails, and but they'll cross them. They'll cross them regularly, especially the dominant breeding bucks. They gotta breed all these does when they're in heat in early November, and so they gotta look for them, and so they cross our cruise trails quite frequently, and they give us positive evidence of where a big buck is today. And this, you know, if you think in terms of that, especially in November, if that buck is going to be in a different place, a different part of his square mile every day. And if you just go over here and sit on this stand side here for the whole season, if you missed the day that he was with a doe in heat that lived over in this area, but she's got a good sized range here, well, you can sit there all season and never see a big buck. So we always like to know where they are, so that every day while we're out there hunting, we always sit within easy shooting distance, downwind or crosswind, of very fresh tracks of a big buck, a mature buck. That way we stay close to mature bucks every day of the season, and the cruise trails give us the evidence we need to figure out where to hunt next. So this is our one of our biggest prerequisites to buck hunting. I want you to know that so you understand what we're talking about from here on today. Well, okay, we're getting ready to go hunting. It's early morning. We already talked about it, that we got up at 4 o'clock, and now we're getting ready, and probably about between 5 and 5:30 we'll be all gone. We'll be heading toward our tree stands or ground level stand sites. Now, before we go, some of us will be using, if not all of us, I don't use it too much anymore myself, but using some kind of scent killers. It would be spraying clothing or boots or whatever with so-called scent killers to reduce their scents. Some of them are wearing special underwear and clothing that's supposed to keep scent from getting out from their body. But as we know, that's not 100% effective. It's, so should you even bother to use it? Well, I say yes. The reason I say yes, especially as the season progresses, is that you can't get rid of all the odor. And every day you wear these clothes, and you're dragging deer, and you sweat and perspire, and your body odors are building up in your clothing. And I think, yes, you should. And we talked about that in our last presentation, about how whitetails react to human scents, let's say within 50 yards, or within 100 yards, or within 200 yards. Well, one of the advantages of stand hunting is this. Normally, if you're sitting at a stand site, very still, what you should be doing, you're not twisting and turning a lot, and you're not smelling strong, and a deer walks downwind of you. And believe me, as many deer walk downwind of you as walk upwind of you, probably more so, because they can smell you out there at 200 yards and even further, actually, by airborne sense. And the way they react and whether or not they're going to stay in the area where you're hunting depends on how strong you smell. So if your odors are relatively mild and you're sitting there and not moving, and the deer discovers you, and even if it can't see you, if figure out that, gee, you're not moving, because that scent isn't growing stronger like it would be if it was coming toward the deer, or it's not, the thing isn't moving that way, which is easy to figure out because the source scent is moving, it's going out. Well, you're a stand hunter. Well, they think, well, now I'm pretty safe for the day. I don't have to worry about this stand hunter because I know where that stand hunter is. But if the deer was within 50 yards, or maybe even 75 yards away, and they suddenly walked into your downwind scent vector and smelled you, if the scent was mild, they wouldn't be particularly concerned about you. It's not moving. And so they'll stay home. They'll stay within their ranges, doing predictable things during predictable time periods and predictable places, which you can take advantage of. Especially if you got a cruise trail and you can see, oh, here's fresh tracks of a big buck just made this morning, and he's heading toward this feeding area up here that, you know, which you know all about because you found it while you were scouting. Well, boy, have you got an advantage there. Well, the trick now is to get there to your stand site without those deer knowing it. It would be nice if that could be done. It doesn't happen too often. If the wind is blowing and leaves are rattling, grass rustling, branches banging against each other, they probably won't hear you. Good masking sounds. If rain is pattering down, raindrops, or even snowing hard, or if you got a stream close to where your stand is. My son Ken has been making, he's been taking rich advantage of a stream that gurgles past some of his stand sites. Have been taking some really nice bucks along that stream. So anything that can cover the sound of your approach is great, but most of the time that isn't going to happen. Now, if you can't get to a stand site without being heard, you know, without your footsteps being heard, the next best thing, which probably accounts for our success most of the time, is that, yeah, they heard some of my footsteps, they were kind of soft, but the way we do it, they don't know what we are. Is that a man or a deer or a squirrel or a marten or a fisher? What is that? And they don't know. And that's, if they don't know, your chances are as good, well, maybe not quite, but pretty darn good, as if they never heard you at all. So, anyway, that's part of what we have to accomplish when we go to a stand site. And this is where a lot of people fail. They can't do it because they don't do what we've learned you have to do. We learned this from our wolves. We got a wolf pack that dens in our study area. And we've seen these deer hunting deer many, many times, up close a lot of times. So we've watched how deer respond to wolves when they see them. And so what we do is what wolves do, to a certain extent. Fortunately, we don't have to get our teeth on a deer to be able to kill it. We can do it with a rifle from way over there somewhere. Okay, now, so anyway, back to scents. Should you use killer scents? Yeah, use them. Because it helps to make sure the deer in your hunting area stay home during the hunting season. And that makes them vulnerable, especially what the deer that want to be vulnerable are those big bucks. So they aren't very vulnerable very often otherwise. Okay, so now we sprayed that on. Anything else we should do? Well, no, what I usually do, you know, you're wearing hunting clothes up in Minnesota. It can be pretty cold out there during the deer season. And we're wearing hunting clothes that keep us nice and comfortable when we're sitting long hours out at a stand site. But when you're hiking, especially if you got deep snow, you can get pretty heated up and you can start perspiring right away. And years ago I learned that's bad. If you're all wet from perspiration when you get to your stand site, before long you're going to be shivering like crazy because that wetness is going to start dry, you know, that wetness is going to make you feel pretty miserable. You're going to get cold. I even, at one time, I used to wear goose down underwear while I was stand hunting, but they were just too darn hot to be wearing while hiking to a stand. So I'd carry them in the pack sack on my stool, attached to my stool. Then when I get close to my stand site, I would stop and change underwear or slip them on, take my outer clothes off, slip them on, and then get there. So I wouldn't get cold. But even with that warm underwear, once you're wet, it won't keep you from starting to freeze and ruin your day of hunting or a half day. So what I do more nowadays, instead of putting on my nice warm coat with the hood on it, I stuff it in that bag on my stool that I carry, on my back, and I wait to put it on until I get close to the stand site. And of course, my shirt's got to be blaze orange, so while I'm out there heading to my stand, even in the dark, it starts to get light before I get there. And somebody sees something moving there, if it's not blaze orange, you might poke a shot over that way. And got to be careful about that kind of thing. But that's what I do to keep from perspiring. So you don't want to perspire. So when you're hiking along, when you're thinking of that, don't hike fast. Just nice, easy, moderate pace. Now, there's two parts, three I used to call it, but we'll settle for two parts to a stand site approach trail. There's the part that's more than 100 to 200 yards long away from the stand, and there's the part within 200 to 100 yards of your stand site. And you treat those a little bit differently. Now what we've learned to do from our wolves, what in the world is that? I'm going to stop. Birds. Okay. What we learned to do from our wolves, who don't want to alarm deer that might see them, is act as if we're not hunting when they really are. When they're trying to find a vulnerable deer, one they can catch for some reason, they don't want that deer to run to the next colony the minute they see them. So they, when they're out searching for deer that they can catch, they walk at a moderate pace. They're not running or moving fast, and they're not stopping, and they keep their head pointed straight ahead. Their nose is telling them what they want to know. They come to a trail scent of a deer. Oh, I think this is one. Maybe it's a fawn. I can get that fawn. Or maybe it's old and crippled. Oh, I can get that one. But anyway, they don't want that deer to know at that point, while they're maybe visible to one another, that we're going to try and get you. So they keep marching right along with their head pointed straight ahead, moderate pace, don't stop, and move along a trail. They like they use cruise trails too, and some of them are man-made trails, like an old logging trail, and sometimes they're a frozen stream, and they're walking the stream. But they have large ranges up to 100 square miles, wolves do, and their cruise trail threads like the string of a necklace from home range of deer to home range of deer all through that area. But they're selecting prey on the basis of odors they get from trail scent or airborne scent. Well, we can't do that. We don't have noses that good, so we have to depend on sight. But meanwhile, you gotta be acting as if there are all kinds of deer around when you are on the way to your stand site, and they're watching you, or they're trying to decide, should we run or not? They'll treat you exactly like they treat wolves. My wife and I, we do a lot of deer photography, use this trick all the time to get close to deer. But anyway, you should walk at a moderate pace, non-stop to your stand site, no stopping along the way. Keep your head pointed straight ahead all the way there. You shouldn't be looking around like, oh, is there a deer there, or is there one over here? Even if you can't see them in the dark, you shouldn't be doing that. Keep your head pointed straight ahead. In the dark, you're going to be using a flashlight anyway. You got to use that and put the beam down close in front of you, maybe about 6 feet ahead of you. Keep it down there low. You don't want it flashing around the woods. You keep it down low and keep your head pointed that direction. And you have to pretend, but it's probably true, that there's deer all around you watching you as you go by. And if you want those deer to stay in this area, you don't want to alarm them. If you make them raise their tails and bound away, if they're mature bucks, they're gone for the season. They'll abandon their range and not come back until after the deer season is over. If it's a doe or yearling or fawn, they'll probably try to sneak back within the next 1 to 4 days, but not the big bucks. You don't want them raising their tails and snorting and bounding away. So you don't see it happening. And in daylight, like when you go out in the afternoon, you got to do the same thing. You think, well, that's foolish. I should be looking for deer, and if I see one, I should shoot it. But if you're acting like you're hunting, like if you're sneaking and often stopping and looking around like that, and if you change course often, going different places, you're dangerous. They see that human is hunting. We don't want to be anywhere around that human. And he can't be trusted to be moving along a trail and stay in that trail. This one, he's liable to turn right toward you and force you to start bounding and then shoot at you with those make thunder with your rifle. You don't want that stuff to happen. If you do stop often, change direction often, if you're not following a trail, a definite trail, so that the deer can trust you when they hear you coming, move aside and stand in cover, maybe not in cover even. Sometimes they just stand in the open and watch you go by. Well, those deer, as long as you keep doing that, they're going to stay there, and you're going to probably see those deer again, and they might show up at your stand site within the next 30 minutes or so. So that's what you need to do. You have to act like a wolf who doesn't want to alarm his prey, and that's what you got to do. Even if you can't see it happening, it is happening. I guarantee you it's happening. Years ago, I used to do a lot of studies about this. I'd go to a stand in the morning, and especially on a day when I got a big buck, so I got a lot of time to do some inquiries around here about what happens when you walk like a wolf or you walk like a man who's hunting a deer. And I would follow parallel routes away from the trail I use on either side, and I'd look for fresh deer tracks. And then I'd follow them in the direction of the trail, and I could find places where deer had stood in the dark and watched me go by, and then walked away. When I was acting like a hunter, stopping off and looking around, I could find tracks of deer that had gone to the side and stopped, and then turned and bounded away, or trotted. Trotting is just as bad. Tail up, and they're emitting they're emitting this ammonia-like odor from their tarsal glands that warns all deer now when there's something really dangerous over here. And that stuff sticks to foliage and everything on the ground for 4 days or more, warning people that this is a dangerous area, you don't want to be here. So look what you're doing to your hunting area whenever you act like a hunter. A lot of guys think stopping off, and when you stop off and you sound like a deer that's feeding. Well, I've listened to a lot of deer feed in the woods. Many, many deer. Gee, I've been at this for 74 years. When they're feeding, you often hear these soft twig snaps. And what are those twig snaps? It's not that they're stepping on twigs. They're eating browse. And when they eat browse, they bite off, chew off slender tips of branches of various shrubs, woody shrubs. And when that piece gets bitten off, there's a soft twig snap that comes with it. So if you're sneaking and you think you're sounding like a deer feeding, and that deer, and it's November and now they're eating browse, where's the browse sounds? Where's those sounds, those soft twig snaps that's supposed to go along with that? You're not fooling those deer one bit. So anyway, and especially if they can smell you, and they're downwind. You're teaching that deer that's downwind that this is the way this hunter hunts. he walks, he sneaks and he stops often and looks around. And they don't want to be in there. They can be 200 yards away and not even be anywhere where they can see you, but they'll recognize, oh, there's that hunter. He smells like this and he's hunting and he's dangerous. So you don't want that. You know, I spent about an hour talking to Fred Bear, the famous bow hunter, American bow hunter, probably the most famous of them all. I had a SHOT Show, a show where manufacturers sell products to people who sell their product. And it was down in New Orleans, and Fred Bear was there. And he was a nice guy, you know, and I almost didn't know who he was. He was sitting in a bench there in a room where having coffee, and I walked in and sat down, and he seemed like a nice guy and started talking to him. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, I asked him, are you Fred Bear? Yes, he says. And I was so proud to meet him. We got talking about stand hunting. Of course, Fred had a lot of experience with stand hunting too. But he told me way back then, yeah, well, he says, when you're stand hunting, don't mess around trying to get a deer on the way to your stand. Go straight there, get it over with. Your odds are lousy if you hunt along the way, and you're ruining the area all the way there when you do that. Just go straight there, and then you're a stand hunter. When you're a stand hunter, you're a successful deer hunter. You're a buck hunter when you're stand hunting. And get that to walk to your stand site out of the way quickly, and with no messing around, and no hunting behavior, and then sit. So anyway, then you're a buck hunter. Otherwise, you're a buck hunting ruiner. So Fred and I agreed on that a lot. We were both kind of happy about agreeing on something like that. Well, anyway, so that's what you want to do. Now, that first section, you know, the way it usually works for us, we get on a cruise trail to go to one of our stand site approach trails, or to a spot where, gee, here's fresh tracks of a great big buck, and he went over that way, and there's a feeding over the area there. Might not be a trail there leading to that. So you walk along a little bit, oh, here's a deer trail heading in that direction, and we'll use the deer trail to go there. And that's probably a smart thing to do, because deer walk on deer trails. And so that probably helps to fool deer into thinking, well, maybe that's a deer after all. But anyway, so that's what you do during that, except for the last 2 to 100 yards before you get to your stand site. Now, when you finally arrive at that point, things get a little tougher, because deer have excellent hearing, really, really good hearing, and so do black bears. So they have incredible hearing. Black bears can hear your heart thumping in a tree when they're near it. But anyway, from that point on, your footsteps got to be made soft. And the way you do it, with each step, you lift your feet clear of the ground, the snow or grass or leaves or whatever's on the ground, and lift it clear. Bend your knees to do it. You can't do it unless you bend your knees. If you go like that, you're going to go through that ground cover. You lift them up and step forward and put your foot down lightly. And you do that with every step from this point on to your stand. And you know, it sounds so simple, but it's hard to do. The minute you stop thinking about it, you're going to be walking just like you always do, probably dragging your heels to be also. You know, deer don't drag their heels, nor do bears. Bears can walk as if they're not actually touching the ground. They can do it so silently. You pick them up and put them down lightly, pick them up, put them down lightly. And when you do that, and you're walking non-stop at a moderate pace in the dark, and if from that point on you're well hidden from wherever your stand is, like say on the edge of a feeding area, so they can't see you coming, they might see a motion through the trees. Look at all the trees over there, and they'll stop and look over there and chew it a little bit and look. No, I guess there's nothing. Maybe it was a bird or a squirrel or something. But anyway, that it can't be 100% on that. But or between you and that and your stand site is a raised area, a high rocky ridge, for example, or a hill or something. You got terrain that hides you as you're coming. And I'm always looking for terrain to hide me as I'm coming, but really heavy cover, I want heavy cover right to where my stand side is, right up to it. So anyway, and you got to be downwind or crosswind. And we'll be talking more about downwind and crosswind next time I talk to you. But anyway, so you got to be there because you don't want them to smell you. You don't want them to see you, but they're going to hear you once in a while at least, a little bit. They're going to hear your soft footsteps. But they won't be able to figure out what you are. As long as they don't know what you are, they're not going to run away. As you get closer, say, well, whatever it is, it's just over there, about 50 yards away, or that 35 or 20. What is that? Well, if they can't figure it out, they're not going to leave. They might move to heavy cover nearby, a patch of heavy cover. They might stay right where they are, but they'll be frozen. And trying to figure out, gee, do we have to run? Or we have to go feed somewhere else? What is that over there? If they can't figure it out, they'll just work and work and work at it, trying to figure it out. Sniffing and listening and looking, watching for movements. That's going to be going on. Well, let's say, now you got to your stand side just fine. What you do from there on, that's part number 3, but this is part number 2. Now, what happens to those deer that don't run away? Well, whitetails, especially the older ones, especially the big bucks, will spend most of their time alone, except, in November when deer are breeding, are pretty sharp. They're more alert about all sounds. They're better at identifying what makes that kind of a sound. They're more apt to run or trot away very rapidly, maybe even snorting. They're more apt to just sneak away quietly, so you didn't even know they were there. But if they can't figure out what you are, they're going to wait. They want to stay here and feed. There's good food here. I like these red osiers that we've been eating. So they won't run away. But they're going to wait a while. They're going to spend a little time there, typically about 30 minutes. That seems like a long time. Now, about 80% of the deer I've taken all my life as a stand hunter have been taken during the first hour, legal shooting hour of the day, from first light, half hour before sunrise, until half hour after sunrise. I don't want to miss a minute of that really great buck hunting hour. That's the best one of the day as far as I'm concerned. So I get there half hour early, half hour before first light, or 1 hour before sunrise. I do that to give those deer their half hour of trying to figure out what I was. Once I'm at stand site, I sit down on my stool, I don't make any more noise, and I hardly even move. So I almost hold my breath the whole time, waiting for legal shooting time. And meanwhile, the deer are waiting too. What is it? Waiting to find out what that was. And after a half hour is over, sometimes 15, they'll settle for 15 minutes. They rarely go more than a half hour. They'll decide, well, whatever it is, it sure isn't dangerous, and we couldn't, it didn't seem like it was a human at all. Humans make a lot more noise, and they do all kinds of things different than they sneak and stop often when they're walking in the woods, that kind of stuff. They didn't do any of those things, and they couldn't figure out who makes your footsteps. So there you are, been sitting there quiet for a half hour, and now it's getting first light, and gee, legal shooting time starts right now. And about then, oh, there's a deer over there, and oh, there's another one over there, and look at that one's got antlers. Holy cow! You gotta look at it. Oh, big antlers. That's the most exciting time of the day in deer hunting as far as I'm concerned. And even if they aren't there, Or maybe they decide that day they're going to feed somewhere else and you missed the boat that day. You did everything right. It's good to get into practice for that. That's a great, you know, the awakening of a forest at first light is usually beautiful and serene. It's almost holy. It's so wonderful to be out there at that time of the day. It's the best time of the day as far as I'm concerned. But you keep doing that, you're going to become one of these guys that gets a mature buck every year. And everybody's going to wish they could hunt like you. How do you do that? You're going to hear them say. But those are some of what I've taught you today are some of the most important precautions in whitetail hunting. Absolutely almost the most important precautions you take in buck hunting. If you want to take older bucks that other people hardly ever see, this is what you got to do to get to a stand site. Okay? Now, let's see, there's a couple other things I wanted to mention. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a couple other things I wanted to mention, and I slipped by them. I didn't mean to. Getting back to deer trails and preparing them early. One of the things we do every year, new stand site approach trails especially, is we put fluorescent tacks like this on them. This is one kind, it's just fluorescent on one side, and when you use those, you have to put one on both sides of a tree trunk. As I mentioned earlier, we commonly get to our stand sites an hour before sunrise, or half hour before first light in the morning, meaning we go through this kind of country in pitch dark. And little tacks, fluorescent tacks, like this one. I like this one. It's fluorescent on two sides, so you only use half as many. And but little fluorescent tacks like this guide us the whole way. It's like following a string of white Christmas lights all the way to your stand. So, and we put them on tree trunks, so 10 to 20 yards apart. And at night, with a flashlight, those things light up ahead of you just like Christmas tree bulbs. And real bright, easy to follow. You know, when you're walking out in the woods, you have no doubt about whether or not you're on the right trail. It just makes it so much easier to get around. If you ever worry about, gee, maybe I'll take a wrong turn and I'll be lost out there all day, it won't happen if you use fluorescent tacks along the trail. And when you put them on trees, put them down about this high above the ground, about 18 inches above the ground. Another thing I do, you know, you're going to be using a flashlight to get out there. Now, you don't want to just bust right out at your stand site with a flashlight on. And one of the things I always do, I kind of, here's a trail I'm going to use and my stand is over there, I kind of look around and say, well, gee, you know, from this point on, any deer that are in that feeding area over there are likely to see that beam. So I got to turn it off. And I put a marker on a tree to tell me this is the spot where you got to turn off your flashlight. And I put a triangle of 3 fluorescent tacks like that. And I come to that triangle, off goes my light. Now, at first when the light goes off, you can't see much. It's pretty dark out there. But even if it's cloudy, if there's any amount of moonlight, a lot of times just bright starlight on a clear night, bright starlight is enough. When we often get northern lights where we hunt in November. But usually there's enough light if your trail is clean, you know, it'll be obvious. You can walk the rest of the way. You stopped here because you turn off your light, so you stop. In my case, that's the place where I'll slip on my coat, take it out of my pack on my stool, and put that on, and get that on. So that's one stop. Then, that's all done silently, and then put the flashlight away and wait for my eyes to adjust, and you see it kind of bumping down. It's kind of strange the way it adjusts. And now, oh yeah, I can see the trail, and then I can go the rest of the way without a flashlight to get to my stand site. Sometimes there's been times when I was going to a spot I had never hunted before in the dark and early morning. And I knew about where I wanted to be, but I couldn't see the last part going to my stand. In a situation like that, well, I'll just take my stool off my back, put it on the ground and sit down on it and relax. Now I'm totally silent, not making any noise, not making any motion. If there's deer out there, we aren't hearing nothing. And I'll wait till it's just light enough when I can finally start to see over there. I'll get up, slip my stool onto my back again and proceed carefully, lifting my feet, putting them down softly, and go ahead. And, oh, here's a good spot, I'll sit right here. So, anyway, that's the way I do that. So, there's more, but we'll be getting into the more stuff on my next presentation. This is the end now for today. This is getting to your stand site from your car or truck or your camp to your stand site. This is what you should be doing. And I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if they swear a blue streak for a half hour. This works. And it certainly works often enough. We see a lot of deer at the end of such a trip to a stand site we don't want to take. That buck's too young, I don't want to shoot that one. Or this doe is not in estrus anymore, so the buck is gone now and it's probably with another doe somewhere. That happens. So that's bound to happen, that's deer. But this is best you can do. And this is pretty darn good. If you're doing this, your odds of taking a buck soon are going to be very good. Excellent. And so get there without being identified is best, but it doesn't happen often, but take advantage of things when it does happen. And the second best is getting there without them being able to, without alarming them, that's number one, without alerting, without them being able to figure out what you are. That works a lot. Right? So you should always make that stand site approach trail walk done just like I explained. You know, just walking non-stop, moderate pace, head pointed straight ahead, and then in that sense, then you add to that lifting your feet, bending your knees clear of the ground, and putting your feet down lightly as you go. Now, if there's dead ladies around, you're still going to make noise, but so does everything else in the woods make that noise when they walk, even squirrels. So don't worry about that. As long as you do it that way, they still won't know what you are. And if your trail's clean, you aren't going to be breaking a lot of big sticks that says that you're something big. You don't want that. Okay. So good luck to you guys, and thanks for watching, and thanks again too for buying my books. We're just sending out a bunch of them again today. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, and you will too for many years to come. See you now.